From the soil to your plate.
Real regenerative farmers, real regenerative science.
Real regenerative discussions.
I'm Mike McCosker.
And I'm Kylie Woodham.
And this is
Grassroots and Gumboots.
No ball, no shortcuts.
Just the dirt, the science and the truth about how your food gets grown.
Let's get into it.
Hello, Mike McCosker.
Hello, Kylie Woodham. How are you?
I'm great, Mike. I'm really good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, super. What's happening up at your direction of the woods today?
Been a busy week on the farm again. We actually had 10 millimetres of rain.
Oh, happy
which was
days.
brilliant. Was better than none, and still a long way short of what we need. But having said that, we'd sold all of the weaners. So in the last week, we've trucked out over 300 head of young cattle.
Yeah.
And that's allowed us just to focus in on the cows. So I'm still doing the fodder shed, every morning to give the sprouted barley to the cows and
Yeah, that's
feeding them
phenomenal.
hay and just waiting for everything to start to rain again and grow again. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Well, we haven't had that rain, but it's still like very mild here in the Hunter Valley and looking very green as I look out my window this afternoon. I've been out in the garden and preparing some compost and spreading some seeds, so getting ready for spring, which feels very imminent at the moment.
Excellent. Yes, I actually did turn some compost through the week as well. I've got a pile down there of about 150 tonnes, so I ran the turner through that just to liven everything up and get it ready for application.
Yeah, well, that sounds exciting, Mike. I mean, I am much smaller scale. I'm doing mine with a pitchfork and sifting it by hand, but ultimately it's the same sort of process, isn't it? And
Yeah.
hopefully for the same result.
Yeah, the nutrients in the compost and the biology in the compost, it's a magnificent fertilizer for gardens and fields. Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on in today's podcast because we've had a really interesting question that's come through for Agony Uncle as opposed
Yeah,
to Agony Aunt. That's you, Mike.
that's me.
Yeah, so first of all, though, we're going to talk about is there anything specifically happening in the markets that you want to talk about, Mike? Anything significant changes in stock prices or what's affecting at the moment?
No, I think at the moment the prices have been pretty good for cattle. I think the cropping side of things is all a little bit uncertain simply because the weather's so uncertain at the moment for
Yeah.
crops. So I know a lot of cropping areas have got crops out of the ground but desperately needing rain. So, you know, we'll see where that leads. If it doesn't rain and the crops are not looking so good, then the prices will obviously lift because the supply will be down.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll just have to see where Mother Nature takes us on that journey.
And what about your crops? What are they doing at the moment?
Nothing because we've been so dry. We got a bit of a start with our fodder crops, had all the multi-species crops up and going, but
Mm.
with no follow-up rain, once the animals had gone through and eaten what was there, it just hasn't regrown. So even the 10 mils has really not been enough because we'd got so dry beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So what else is coming up for you this week, Mike? You've got a great workshop happening on Friday.
Yeah, I know the podcast will probably be released sort of after the event, but this Friday we've got a one-day farmer day with Landcare down at Yarry Lakes, which is
Yep.
down sort of in the Pilliga, southwest of Narrabri,
Ah,
northwest.
wow. That's interesting country, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's huge acres down there, a lot of farming and livestock, so mixed operations, which is
Hmm.
excellent. We'll have a great day.
Yeah, they'll pick up plenty of tips, Mike. Is it being run specifically by Carbonate or it's run by Landcare?
It's a combination of land care and carbonate. So that's northwest. No, no, I better get this right, hadn't I?
I put you on the spot now, haven't I?
Yeah, it's the Erie Lakes. and it's the Northern Slopes Land Care grouping. So Northern Slopes Land Care grouping, and in
Yeah.
combination with carbonate.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant, that's really been a really brilliant introduction for lots of people, those types of workshops, aren't they, Mike? Because they are really interesting for farmers to take a little bit of a entry level or take a first look at soil biology. And then obviously your scientific background and practical knowledge makes come alive for so many people.
Yeah, there's always a bit of a mix of people. Some people are just brand new to thinking about soil biology, and other people have been undertaking some regenerative practice for a number of years. So, um, it's always great to share amongst the participants. But then, really, what I'm doing is just sharing what I've been doing over the last 30 years and all the lessons that I've learned in trying different things and what has worked to build my soil health and other things that haven't worked so well. So,
I
yeah.
think you're being a bit humble there, Mike, because I've been to a couple of your workshops and they're not just you talking about what you've done for the last 30 years. So, I mean, a lot of people who have a very practical mindset get a lot out of your workshops, but then the people who have very deep science knowledge also get a lot out of it. So, I think you cover a lot of bases.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of one of the skills that being a farmer at heart, then everything that I've learned, I've tried to put into practice. So, and
Hmm.
I've been to a lot of different workshops myself over the years, so I know what's useful to a farmer and what's sort of too scientific. So we make a lot of the science in simple language and practical actions, and that's the
Yeah.
pleasure of the day. And as an example, one of the things that we're doing is we're teaching people how to make a poo brew. They lovingly call it Mike's poo brew. It's not really my poo brew, but we take cow manure, fresh cow manure, and ferment that into a biological inoculum for the soil. And you can use that as an excellent fertilizer and a base for putting other nutrients into. And it just helps stimulate the soil biology. And perfect way to make whatever you're doing in your fertility program more effective and more efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. I know that that was one of the highlights from the Warra Creek workshop that you did. Everyone
Yeah.
was really, really enthralled by that. And I think that brings us on to our agony uncle question for this week,
Yeah.
because we've had a really interesting question come in from a farmer who's in the Hunter Valley and they are in the thoroughbred horse industry.
Yep.
So their pastures are specifically for horses.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a movement happening in the horse industry where people are starting to look to alternatives for chemical inputs and reducing any sort of other cost inputs like diesel, which
Hmm.
and urea, which at the moment are a bit tricky to get hold of, or the price of them is going up. So I'd really love you to talk a bit more about that in light of that, Mike, because this horse breeder has heard a few whispers from a few other breeders who are implementing those sorts of methods and having really great success. So, can you talk to that a little bit? Especially, I suppose, that it doesn't matter whether you're cropping or you're uh, beef or your sheep or your whatever it is that you're growing, goats, it's
Yeah.
kind of applicable to any industry. We also have horticulture clients as well. So, can you chat a bit about that bio amendment, Mike, and what sort of effects you've seen?
Yeah. So the principles are the same across whatever you're doing. We're trying to grow grass fodder or crops from a
Mm,
soil that is really this cooperation between the plants and the soil biology. It's this cooperation between plants and biology that actually makes our soil what it is. It makes it
mm,
alive. So
mm,
whatever industry we're in, we have to keep that in the core of our focus. And
mm,
horses can be hard on pasture, and
very hard. Yeah.
any sort of stud operation or breeding operation can be difficult to manage the pasture like we like to. With cattle, it's easy enough to mob everything together and have them move the landscape. So they have a crash graze, and then the landscape gets a rest, and that's where everything
Mm-hmm.
recovers and grows. But if you've got to keep one animal joined up to a particular another animal, and you've got to keep them in the same place, it makes it really hard to get that rest. So you've really got to help then. That rest period where the plant grows up is where the plant's leaves make the sugars and feed the food into the
Mm-hmm.
biology. So
Mm-hmm.
if we don't let those plants grow up again, those plants recover, then we're not getting the food into the soil to feed the soil biology. And that's when the soil starts to collapse. So
Yes.
we need to, whatever we do, get some food in there. And that's what these biological ferments help to do. They help to re-inoculate the good bugs in there, and they also take a bit of food source in there as well to feed the biology that's already present and trying to grow there. So it helps build this synergy. There's two ways we can do it. We can do it just as a something like the poo brew, which is a bit of an inoculum and a food source, or we can help the plants by putting any sort of foliar fertilizer or mix on top of the plants that helps the plants make more sugar. So any mix
Mm-hmm.
that helps lift the bricks contents of the plants. And that'll help.
Can you explain to us about the bricks content, Mike, and why that's important?
Yeah, so the bricks is it's really the total dissolved solids, but it correlates very closely to the sugar content.
Mm-hmm.
And when the plant bricks are high, when we measure the
Mm.
leaves of the plant and we get a high bricks reading, that means the sugar content in the plant is really high. And the plant will push up to 80% of those sugars out through the roots to feed the biology. So
Yeah,
if our
wow.
plant bricks is low, which means our sugars are low, means the plant's barely got enough food to feed itself and build itself, let alone feed
Mm-hmm.
the biology.
Mm-hmm.
So the higher we can get that plant bricks, the more the plant can push those sugars into the roots to feed the soil biology. And that's what we want to happen.
Does bricks correlate to protein at all? Or how does the protein level rise in pasture?
Well, the protein is built from the simple building blocks that the plant puts together. Now, the plant's really good at making simple sugars, but taking those simple sugars and making them into complex sugars and then adding nitrogen to it and making a protein, there's a lot of physiology that's got to happen within the plant. Even the
Mm-hmm.
movement from the first simple sugar to the second simple sugar could have six different steps involved, and
Mm-hmm.
each one of those steps will have some sort of an enzyme that's actually associated with making that happen. And a lot of those enzymes require particularly nutrients to build them. So when we don't have, good access to minerals from the soil because the
Mm.
biology is not working, then the plant starts to lack the very enzymes that it needs to make the simple sugars into the proteins that we are ultimately harvesting. So yes,
Okay. And
as we
then,
get the soil going and the plant going, then the plant does make more proteins and higher protein content. Yeah.
yeah, because that's obviously, I mean, it's important in livestock farming, but also especially with horses, and growing hay and pastures and grains and everything, really.
Yeah.
It relates to
Yeah.
everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this also comes back to not just getting one single crop going strongly, like you don't have a monoculture of oats. It needs to be a multi-species. In fact, there was research done in England that showed that you needed 80 something species in your pastures to grow or to breed a Group 1 winner. That was one of the links across the horse industry was that when you had 80 species in your pasture, that you were breeding the Group 1 winners. Now,
Mm.
a lot of people would go, "Oh my goodness, I don't even know 80 species. I've never seen that many in my pasture." So, we've just got to look at nature and go, well, why does that work? Some plants will have a higher protein.
Diversity.
Yeah. some plants will have a higher protein and that'll help the horses, but that plant probably needs the other plants with it to make it grow better.
Mm,
Even on my farm this year, we had some paddocks that we got planted with just straight oats because I wanted to harvest some seed.
mm-hmm,
Easier to harvest it when it's just one variety.
mm-hmm.
So I had straight oats, and then I had the paddock right beside
Right.
with a multi-species.
Mm-hmm.
Same variety of oats, but now
Yeah.
mixed in with a whole heap of other plants.
And what happened?
Well, the oats by itself was about half the height of the multi-species mix.
Wow.
Same variety of oats, but we
Same
had
climate, same inputs, same
double the
everything.
growth where we had it mixed in with other plants. So
Amazing.
yeah, just incredible.
I just quickly before we move on, because I could talk about horses all day, Mike, as you well know,
Yeah,
but I just am interested then around the chemical use for weeds, different weeds, or getting rid of particular species in paddocks.
yeah,
What does that look like for the soil biology once you start spraying chemicals, weed killers?
yeah, terrible. You know, every bit of poison we put into the system has a knock-on effect. So,
Mm-hmm.
we might be just aiming for one plant or one, problem plant, a weed. Now, in nature, there is no such thing as a weed.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a weed because it's growing somewhere that we don't want it to be growing.
Yes,
So, weeds, in fact, are part of the biodiversity. And I understand that some plants are poisonous, and so if they're growing in the wrong place, they are a problem, and we do have to take them out. So
sure.
we may have to take them out manually, or we may have to take them out with a herbicide. So the thing to do is to use the softest chemical that you possibly can, and then do whatever you can afterwards to recover the biology.
Okay.
So that'd be a perfect operation to put a poo brew on after you've done your chemical spray, maybe a week
Yeah.
later, to help the soil biology recover from the knock-on effect of that chemical.
A little bit like taking yogurt after you've had a dose of antibiotics to get things perking up again.
Yeah, that exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the antibiotics knocks the flora around in your tummy, so you re-inoculate it after that. Yeah, and
Hmm.
it's sort of like one step backwards, one step forwards. So if we can get away without using the chemicals, it's always better. And in fact, trying to build diversity in a pasture is a case of just adding diversity and adding diversity. And quite often, the balance of plants will move as the soil improves anyway.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, we're going to move on, Mike, to VRG. Can you tell us quickly about that? Because we're going to be talking about one of the pillars today, which is farmer knowledge and well-being. So, can you just give us a quick rundown on VRG and the pillars,
Yeah.
and we'll get into farmer knowledge and farmer well-being and why that's so important.
Yeah, rightio. So the VRG, or the Verified Regen Grown, is a brand that Carbonate has put out to support farmers that are doing regenerative farming, to help
Mm-hmm.
farmers show the public what they're doing and help
Mm-hmm.
the public trust the farmers and the work that they're doing with the farm. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very comprehensive program. We ask the farmers to collect data across 8 different streams of information on the farm.
Yep.
The first one, which we will discuss in a moment, is farmer well-being and knowledge. We also get them to check the soil carbon, the biodiversity, the water cycle efficiency. We get them
Yep.
to measure or keep an eye on any chemical use on the farm. We get a carbon balance. What's going on? Is this farm emitting or actually sequestering carbon? We look at the nutrient density. If that's something that's going directly into the food chain, we want to know that that's the best quality food that we can produce. And then we also look at the connection with Indigenous knowledge about the landscape and see, where the farmers are in learning from our Indigenous people and how this landscape works. Oh, I've just lost you. There we are. We're back again.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't lose you. So today, Mike, we're going to talk about Pillar One, which is the very first section that people are introduced to VRG. Can you
Yeah,
explain normally what takes 1 hour to go through in about 10, 15 minutes?
yeah, no problems. Well, pillar one is farmer knowledge and well-being, and um, when we think of that, the decision maker, the farm team, it's so important that you're in a good space because
Yep.
stress can have a huge impact on your health, and if your health is not good or your stress levels are high, then your ability to make decisions in the landscape
Mm,
declined. So you're not
yep.
going to make the best decisions if you're not doing very well personally. The
Yep.
other element of it is having a good goal. We love that if farmers have had some sort of introduction or knowledge around holistic decision making. Holistic decision making is designed specifically to make decisions in complex environments. And
Hmm.
managing nature is really complex. I
Yeah,
mean,
which can change day by day, literally.
day by day and week by week, the variability of dealing with the weather and making decisions in the middle of that variability, that there's enough stress in that without anything else going on.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
How often do you see in that first session where a light switches on for people? Because I feel like having gone through that process myself, the holistic decision making process, that it it really changes everything from that day forward. As in,
Yeah.
suddenly you are thinking about things. Do I really want to be a farmer? Do I want to stay doing this for the rest of my life? Do I really want to either pass this on to my children or burden my children with this? So, yeah, I think that'd be interesting to hear about that, Mike.
Yeah, it is. I think that, the family farming side of farming is really very closely aligned with passing the farm on through the generations of the family.
Mm, mm,
And that creates a couple of things. Firstly, you've got multiple generations working on the farm together. And
hmm.
you know what it's like. The younger people always think the older people are bits of boomers and don't know how to make a decision, and the older people think the
Yes,
younger people are a bit flippant and not not wise. But
yes.
in that situation, we've got to have a language that we can share to make these complex decisions. And so this is why we like this holistic decision making model because it gives
Hmm.
us a way of having a clear language about what we're doing. It looks at the values that we're farming with. Now, the values, and this is where my father and I had difficulty initially because we started as a chemical farm, but I had chemical poisoning. So it became really important for me not to have to use chemicals, if at all possible, because every time I went near them, I just got sick again. So
Yes.
one of my values was that no, we're not using chemicals in this farming operation, and that wasn't necessarily one of Dad's original values. So
Yeah, right.
just having the values defined in our goal now
Mm,
gave us a way to sort through what we were aiming to do. We also had to develop a picture of what success looks like in 25 years' time. What does this farm look like then? The
hmm.
whole operation. How does the management transfer from one generation to another generation? What does the farm look like? What does the machinery look like? All of those things are a part of this picture of what 25 years out looks like. Now, we all know if we're going on a journey, we need to know where we are starting the journey, but we also need to know where we're going because there's no use jumping in the car and heading down the road thinking
Hmm.
that we're driving to Sydney when we're actually driving to Brisbane. We actually need to know at the start where we're headed.
And everyone in the car needs to know.
Yeah. And everybody's had a chance to discuss where we're going and
Hmm.
come to agreement as, yes,
Hmm.
I want to go to Sydney. Or no,
Oh,
I actually don't want to go to Sydney. I want to go to Brisbane.
or I want to catch the plane.
Yeah, yeah. And so having that defined in this goal becomes really, really useful then
Hmm.
for discussing how individual decisions are made on the farm. We've got an idea of where we're going. We've got an idea of the values that we want to maintain. And now we're looking at, well, do we do it with this enterprise or that enterprise? And
Hmm.
one of the things that holistic decision making does is it gives us a list of questions that we can test our decisions against. And when we do that, we might have, say, a choice between beef cattle or sheep. And we can look at those two enterprises and run through
Yep.
these testing questions and see which one is going to get us towards our long-term goal more quickly and more effectively.
Yes. Yeah. One of the other things I've noticed a lot, Mike, is mental health and well-being is part of that section as well. And
Yeah,
you've had obviously a very long, protracted drought, which affects people differently, but usually in a pretty negative way. How important is it for farmers, especially, to be very mindful of their mental health and to discuss or have maybe even a trigger point plan that they might have for drought they have for themselves as well?
yeah, it is really, really important. The the process of managing through a drought is tremendously stressful. I remember the 2018-19 drought.
Mm,
It was the most difficult mental 2 years that I'd ever had. And this is me that I've had a lot of this training. We've been doing things on the farm to
hmm.
help the resilience. But if it
Yep.
doesn't rain, it doesn't rain. So, having a plan or a way to deal with that is really, really important. Otherwise, that stress just sits there and spins around and around inside of our head. And you know, it's
I suppose
unfortunate.
that's why it's so important too, Mike, that everyone else in the room is on the same page about why we're doing this. Because when you get
Yeah,
into tough times like this, and one party says, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why are we putting ourselves through this? Whereas if
yeah,
everyone's on the same page and they're saying, it will rain one day, we're doing this for our kids, or we're doing this for whatever reason they decide, that's why that's
yeah.
so important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look at my dad and he has farmed his whole life with the legacy of being able to pass that on to the next generation. That's
Hmm.
one of his strongest values. That's kept him
Mm.
getting up in the morning and working hard and working late. And I think most family farms are very much like that.
Yes.
There is this legacy issue. So that's why we keep going. Having a trigger point plan, you mentioned that. That's actually really important as well because in the difficulty when you're in the fight, the training's got to kick in. That plan has to kick in to say, righto, if this happens, that's what I do next. So when our
Yes.
rainfall, we measure our rolling rainfall.
Sure. Yep.
And when that hits a certain point, we've got to make the hard decisions to sell the stock that don't and not core to the operation, get them off
Sure.
the
Yep.
place and get the pressure off. If we tried to keep those animals, then the cost of feed was going to go through the roof, not to
And
mention the
outweighs.
amount of labor and time that we would have to put
Mm.
into that. So,
Hmm.
when we were in a better place mentally, we were able to make a plan and say, well, when we get to this point in the rainfall, that's when we have to make a decision. And, I didn't want to sell those young cattle that left because they were still only half the animal that I knew the potential to be.
Yes.
But that potential needed Mother Nature to be helping, and she hasn't been. So we just
Yeah.
we had to make that decision, and we had to send them on their way.
I suppose that makes it doesn't make it easier. It probably does make it easier, but not in that sense. It makes it easy. And at least then you can say, well, we decided this a year ago, or we decided this 6 months ago. Now we've just got to follow the plan. And it's
Yeah,
not cast in stone. So you could have said, hey, we just want to give it, we can see some rain on the forecast. We're not going to do it this week. We're going to do it in a month. But to
yeah,
have that plan to start out with gives you such stability and confidence, doesn't it?
yeah. Yeah, and with the holistic grazing, another reason why we love when farmers have had some exposure to this, you have actually a pretty good idea of what your fodder levels are in front of you.
Hmm.
And so we've got a little bit of runway. It's not a case of just one day we wake up and go, oh my God, we're out of feed. It's we've got a bit of runway, a bit of vision there, and we know that we need rain by certain times to keep that fodder coming along.
Yes, yeah,
And so, we got to a point that we pulled the trigger on selling off the younger animals. It wasn't what we wanted to do, but it certainly gave a sense of relief when we made that decision. And the market's
yes.
been great. So we actually got very close to our budgeted income for those animals, and
Happy
five,
days.
6 months ahead of when we normally would have got it. So that good market right now has actually helped us out.
Yeah.
And there's now just a real sense of relief because I can focus on the cows and make sure they're healthy and get pregnant again for next year. And yeah,
Yeah, that might have instigated a new management plan, Mike. I mean, if you can cut a couple of months off production and receive a price that's similar, assuming the market stays the same, which is
yeah. Well, if the
purely
market had stayed the same, there's still, you know, probably another $1,000 a head in those animals. So, that's we could say, oh, we've lost $1,000 a head, but we haven't because getting that $1,000 on our farm would have meant that we'd have to put, probably $600 or $700 worth of feed down the animal's throat. And
that's not accounting for your driving around feeding out your
yeah,
diesel, your car. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What's been the most interesting part of putting people through the process, that first step, Mike? What have you learnt from different farmers as they go through that process?
You know, quite often the first time you ask somebody what their values are, it's like a blank whiteboard and they go, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly the older generation, like my dad's now 82, and he had all sorts of trouble
Mm,
defining what his holistic goal was. He had to,
mm-hmm.
say what his values were that he was farming for, and so it really when people sort of sit long enough and discuss it together, so you've got to have the whole family there and you start to discuss these things and actually go, oh, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, one of my values is to be debt free, and at the
I mean,
moment,
everyone has values. They just
yeah,
might not have them written down, or they haven't
yeah,
actually
yeah.
thought about what that means to them and their family.
Yeah, and when you finally get them out, then you go, oh, okay, well, Dad, if we wanted to be debt free, we shouldn't be buying a new tractor every other year. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it gives then a chance to discuss what we're doing in a way where we've got some shared language around it. Yeah,
Mm,
it's brilliant. It really does take some of the stress out of those sort of management relationships, and also, having a picture of what success looks like in 25 years. People are farmers particularly, are very innovative. And once you actually start to build that picture, it's amazing how often, you know, we talk through this process where we will overestimate what we can achieve in 12 months, but we'll very much underestimate what we can achieve
mm,
in 5 years.
mm-hmm.
So when you start to build this longer term vision, in 5 years' time, you'll look back and go, oh my goodness me, look where we've got to. You know?
Yes.
Yeah,
And how important is that for people? It's not just measuring your soil, but measuring yourself and then looking back in 5 years, having had a very specific marker to look back and say,
yeah,
wow, we said that we were going to be debt free in 5 years and we've done it. I mean, I
yeah.
couldn't believe that we'd have achieved that, That's really important.
Yeah, that can be the sort of elements that start to come out of this. You might have in that longer term that you wanted to buy the neighbours out, and when the opportunity comes up, then you're ready to go
Mm,
because you've already been thinking about it and you've been getting the foundations ready to take that leap once the opportunity's there.
And
if
for
you,
some farmers, it might even just be we want to go on an annual holiday. We just want to be able to get out of here for 2 or 3 weeks and
absolutely. That's an interesting with myself and my dad. I grew up going on a holiday to the beach for 3 weeks every year. I've never been able to do that with my family. I don't know whether the farming got busier, harder to make a living, or whether it was just me not getting organised well enough to put that in as a top value and
hmm
simply go, no, actually, these 2 weeks every year, I'm taking the family away.
hmm
So, and probably what's sitting in the middle of that was the communication between myself and my dad, going, well, Dad, this is a high value for me and my family, and we're going. And then he goes, yeah, sure. Why are you still here? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, you should be going on a holiday. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mike. I mean,
Yeah.
even we think about going on a holiday, or I do with 4 kids to a beach these days. But there are also ways of doing it too. Sure, you could camp or you could find somewhere nice to hang out with your family for a couple of weeks. So those sorts of
Yeah.
things are really important too. Off farm, and then partners that they're included, that they might not be necessarily as invested in the farm or attached to it quite as much as you are. But you and Helen are such a great partnership, Mike. I mean, how did you two first sit down and work out your own goals? How did that come about? I mean, was that something that you learnt from a course, or how did that surface for
Initially,
you two?
we actually bought the course to our district back in 1997, 98, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Ward did a workshop on our farm. We opened it up to everybody that was in the district. So we had sort of, I don't know, about 20, 23 people that
Mm-hmm.
did that training. It was a 3 day holistic management workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Just brilliant. And that's where we learned how to set this holistic goal. So I already had that training and I didn't get married until 2002. So when Helen joined the family, she obviously was becoming a part of the overall management team. Now, Helen would say, oh, but I don't do anything on the farm. But she's my key support. So when I'm
Yeah.
coming in and talking about decisions, the fact that she's got a share in that vision of where we're going, it makes it so much easier to converse, throw ideas around, give good feedback to each other. So
Mm.
that this ability to have a shared goal and have language that you can discuss it with it's priceless from a point of view of helping you make good decisions.
Yeah, and I think you're being very humble on Helen's behalf as well, because I know she has an incredibly quick mind and a great business sense. And on top of being an accountant, I'm sure she makes up a very, very important part of the farm, even though she might not be out sitting on the tractor every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. She says, I'm not part of the farm management. And I go, oh, darling, you don't think so? Yeah. You're very
Yeah, yeah,
much a part
yeah.
of the farm management.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
She's probably the one that says don't get a new tractor every 2 years, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we've got a shared vision on that because we've
Mm.
been able to speak about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. And
Yeah.
how is that now transferring into your own kids? How do you invite them into that conversation?
We have discussions around who wants to be a farmer. I mean, and you sort of, when we were discussing this earlier, you sort of mentioned, oh, maybe I don't want to put my kids through this. Well, ultimately, as a family operation, it's a privilege to be able to pass the farm on to the next generation.
Mm, hmm
We can't always, we've got 4 kids, so you can't always chop the farm up into four. So you've got
mm,
to sort through and find who's got the greatest desire to come back and be on the farm.
yeah.
Joel Salatin says, that if we can make the farm operation something that the kids want to be involved with,
Yes,
then we've
yes,
been successful. And
yes.
that's also been a big driver for me in getting the chemicals out of the operation. There's nothing exciting about getting it all cloaked up in a chemical protection
Yeah.
suit to go to work for the day. But if you
Mm.
can step out there and know that you're working with nature and there's no toxicity involved in what you're having to deal with, then it makes it so much nicer. Yeah.
And that pride in creating healthy food, I mean, that's something to be very mindful of and to be grateful of. And it's a very honorable profession. I remember when I was farming and my eldest child used to say to me, "Don't tell people you're a farmer, mum, tell them that you're an entrepreneur." And I used to say, "Yeah, but I've probably got the most important job in the world because I'm keeping people alive through beautiful nutrition and taking care of the
Yeah.
environment and myself at the same time." So I think that mind shift around that production, what are you producing? Well, you're producing nutrition and energy and health and vitality.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
I think
something
that
to be proud of.
that gets underestimated in when we think of farmers. When consumers think of farmers and food production, they don't often think about the difference in quality in the
Mm,
way that the food is produced. I mean, you've got
mm.
an awesome story about making the chicken stock and using different chickens in making the chicken stock. Can you share that story? Because I thought it was incredible.
Yeah, well, that came about purely by accident, Mike, that we were making our egg production, we were getting bigger and bigger. We didn't actually realize that after 12 months, the hens were retired, which in Ireland meant that they were sent to the UK for dog food. And to me, that felt a fairly humiliating end for something that had provided us with a livelihood. So we
Mm.
extended their life to 24 months because they weren't under as much pressure as industrially farmed hens.
Mm.
And I wanted to ensure that the hens had a as noble end as possible, which meant us processing them on site and using the carcasses for a chicken bone broth. So what happened there was in relative terms, when you make a chicken bone broth from something that's been alive for a couple of years, in comparison to something that's been alive for a couple of months, if they're lucky, you end up with a completely different product. And every culture around the world has chicken bone broth for health and recovering from sickness. But the difference is that the nutrients that comes from the bones of an animal that's been alive for a couple of months and the bones of something that's been alive, walking outside, fresh air, living the life they should, is completely different. So
Yeah.
as we started producing the bone broth and it started receiving some accolades, including the Chef's Choice Award at the Irish Food Awards,
Yeah.
we
Wow.
we had this incredible demand for this product. So we started sourcing carcasses from an organic farm and we just couldn't get the same results because it was completely different. So the taste was different, the consistency, the color, everything about it was so different because the hens had had that incredible life. They'd had a diverse nutritional level throughout their whole life. They'd been fossicking and using their bones and their muscles as they should have been. So we had to limit it. We just had to put the price up.
Well, I want to talk into this a little bit because for consumers, it's really difficult to understand what's going on here. Isn't a chicken a chicken? Isn't a chicken broth a chicken
Yeah.
broth? But
Mm.
when you think of the industrial model for chickens, they put a lot of antibiotics in the feed because they're pushing the animal so hard that the animal
And
continues to get sick.
and they're
And so,
confined, Mike, too. They're not
yeah,
living in a natural environment. They're literally side
well,
by side. They can't really
yeah.
move around. They don't go outside. Even if they're free range, they don't go outside. So,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that's what I was about to say. Even if they are in a free range environment, that still in the industrial model means that they're just walking around inside the shed and they're
Yeah, and
getting
it just
this
means they
feed
they have
that's
a
pushing them and the antibiotics and so all of that means that not much of a carcass developed there. In fact, that's why the animals are sent away after 12 months because they're already worn out after 12
mm,
months.
mm,
And
they're
then
spent.
even
They call them spent
yeah,
hens.
spent, worn
Yeah,
out. Was that
yeah,
enough?
yeah.
But and then even in an organic situation, without that ability to walk around and graze diverse plants and grab bugs as chickens do and scratch up seeds and worms as chickens do, an organic operation might not have the antibiotics in it, but it's still quite often housed in a shed called free range, but they haven't got the same access
Mm.
to pastures. So at a
It's
consumer
probably,
level,
yep.
it's got to be pasture raised.
Yeah. I mean,
Pasture
it's a little
raised
bit,
free range.
Mike, like feedlot animals because essentially they're living in their own defecation. They're pretty much confined to a specific area, and there's
Mm,
no natural pasture for them to graze. Whatever was there was eaten probably a couple of years ago.
yeah,
So it's the same sort of theory. I mean, that's what makes the even the meat of those birds was completely different
yeah,
because the animals were constantly being moved. So we used fencing that was able to be picked up and it was electrified, so it kept them safe. There was a dog with them that kept them safe from foxes, and we moved the houses at least every week, but sometimes every couple of days. So the hens were never they were never burdened with worms because they were always
yeah,
moving, and
yeah,
there was no need for us to worm them or have any sort of chemical intervention. So
yeah.
how did we get off the topic of farmer wellbeing, Mike?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. We diverged a bit there, but it is actually really important to help people that are going to the grocery store understand that
Understand that, yeah.
what they're looking for. It's also important that the farmers that do what you were doing, because it's not an easy thing necessarily to take the time and effort to manage the chickens that way. It's a lot easier just to lock them in a shed.
Just
But
just touching back on farmer well-being though, Mike, I mean, I can assure you that I was a very happy farmer when I was doing those exercises because there were so many days when I would go and I'd move the tractor and the hens were fed and you'd be sitting there on the grass and the hens would be pecking at your boots and coming all around you. I mean, you could see how healthy they were and how enjoyable their life was. There was no pecking at each other. There was no cannibalism between the hens.
yeah,
And that really had a huge effect on me. And I know that I gave them the best life possible. And that made me really happy. You know,
yeah,
stockmanship, you always want to see your stock in a healthy, happy, living to the closest of their instincts as possible. So for me, that was very, very rewarding. And being able to tell my story and not have any blots in it where I said, oh, yeah, but we had to, after 12 months or,
mm,
yeah, I think that's very important too. And that was our values in our family. Everybody was very, very committed to that too.
yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome, and it really does. You know, in a chemical operation, I don't think farmers really get a sense of the fact that they're quite often at war with nature. Their whole management process is, I see that weed, what can I kill that weed with? I
Hmm.
see an insect, what can I kill that insect with? Once we get into this regenerative side of things, it's, ah, I wonder why nature's got that plant here, and can I help adjust the balance so that nature doesn't need that plant here? Or if that insect is here, what's made that plant out of balance in a way that's drawn that insect in to take out the garbage? Can I improve the health and balance of that plant? Can I put a foliar fertilizer on it, and then that insect doesn't see it as food anymore? Now the insect goes away, and in fact it becomes better quality food for humans. So that not being at war with nature takes a
Yeah,
whole heap of stress out of the situation. You know,
yeah,
I think we intrinsically know when we're working in tune with nature,
mm,
we're a lot more in tune with our own inherent nature. So there's a lot less stress in that situation. I'm sure that you tell any soldier, is war stressful? And it absolutely is. You know,
yeah.
and if you're at war with nature, that is just very stressful.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of a couple of things because I remember harking back to Joel Salatin again, listening to him talk about the people who want to, grab nature in a headlock and wrangle her to the ground,
Yeah.
and that nature is always stronger or more powerful or will win in the end. And the other part of that makes me think a little bit about some mindfulness that I've been looking at recently around listening, where I feel like regenerative ag really invites you in to listen to your landscapes. And it's
Mm,
a little bit like a conversation that if you're listening and you're participating in a respectful way, that you let the other person talk and you sit back and you look and you listen, rather than someone tries to talk, you talk over the top of them, or you talk louder, or you're like, they're an
Mm.
idiot, I'm just going to talk over the top of them. It's a little bit like that relationship with nature, having a respect and sitting back and watching and listening. And how can I enrich this environment as nicely as possible? So
Yeah,
to me, that really feels very similar.
it's amazing when you start to see how the natural systems are working, that we find that nature's actually got it sorted out reasonably well.
I
You know,
love that. Yeah.
we might think, but I need nitrogen. Well, in fact, nature has a nitrogen cycle. We just need to know how to work it. And it's a lot
Yes.
cheaper than buying nitrogen in a bag. So
Yeah.
it's only that we haven't been aware of it, and we've done something to disrupt that natural process. And when we re-engage that natural process, then we don't need the artificial fertilizers, or we don't need the chemicals to come in and rescue our operation. So, with insects, nature's process with insects is that they only attack plants that are out of balance or deficient.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. We balance a plant up, and the insects will move away from the plant and actually probably move on to the weeds because we've put them out of balance by trying to balance up our crop.
Isn't
So
that incredible? That's
we can have
amazing.
nature working with us instead of
Mm.
instead of this fight against nature. And that's just reminding ourselves of what the natural principles are and working in line with those natural principles. It's not that we say that chemicals are necessarily bad. We get to the point that we don't need them because now we're
Hmm.
working in this natural balance and natural process.
And that must be astounding for farmers when that happens and they're watching and they think suddenly, oh, hang on a second, we don't actually need to use this. There's no need for us to use that anymore.
Yeah, it can be really astounding. I mean, we saw a farm that had been beautifully managed in a locust plague. Now, you would think that locusts just eat everything in front of them.
Yes.
And they came through and ate the roadside verges, and they ate the green things off the washing line, and they
Whoa,
didn't touch the crop because the crop was balanced up and didn't send out a signal that said, I'm out of balance or deficient. So
that's
the
insane.
locusts just went over that property and took out the next one. It's incredible the way nature works. We might,
Yeah.
when you're a cotton farmer
Incredible.
on your 12th
Amazing.
spray, you might go, I don't understand. I've got insects, I've got to deal with them. Well,
Hmm.
we can deal with them in a couple of ways. If we get to the point that it's doing too much damage, we've got to stay in business. So you might have to use the chemical to
Hmm.
rescue the crop. But next time we can set the crop up a bit differently so it
Hmm.
doesn't send out this signal that says I'm out of balance or deficient.
Yeah. Are there cotton farmers up in the Pilliga, Mike?
No, not in the Pilliga, I don't think. But we did have a cotton farmer that used to grow biological cotton. So he didn't use any chemicals. He didn't need any
Yeah.
chemicals because he didn't get the insects there. It is possible. It's
Fascinating.
complex, but it's possible.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating. Listen, Mike, again, we could talk all day, but I want to let our listeners know that if they would like to contact you about a workshop, they can get in touch by
Yep,
g'day@carbonate.org.au. They
yep,
can comment underneath the YouTube in the comments, or they can contact us through Instagram or Facebook, any of the above. And
yep.
that's also applicable for our section Agony Uncle, which is Mike. And if you want to ask a question, then we can talk about it on next week's podcast. So, best of luck for Friday, Mike. Have you got anything else that you want to talk about quickly before
No, I'm just wondering if we answered the question
we
about
finish up?
the poo brew as well as we should have. You know, taking that ferment from the rumen of the cow, from the fresh cow manure, essentially,
Mm,
you're copying this link that nature has between animals and the land.
yes,
That animals are a walking bioreactor. They're just carrying around the biology with them, and they manage the
amazing.
moisture in there. So in a dry environment, animals are actually critical to restoring the landscape. And what we're doing is we're hijacking a little bit of that, taking that biology and growing it out and applying it to the landscape. So we're helping the natural process.
Yeah, okay. Well, how about next week we might put how would you feel about putting the recipe for Mike's Poo Brew into the comments of our next week's podcast, Mike? And
Yeah,
you might just talk
absolutely.
us through it in a bit more detail because I know that anyone who has been through that process finds it incredibly satisfying. And then
Yeah,
it was really exciting to watch the farmers from our last cohort who started applying it and the beautiful discussions between each of them about how it had worked and the
yeah.
beautiful results that they got. They were very lucky that they got some rain and then they were all applying it. But again, it was just fascinating to hear them all talk about it. It's incredible. So, yes, Tanya, who's our first person who we've answered a agony uncle question for, we're going to cover it again next podcast.
Yeah, and all the farmers that are coming to the workshop, they get the recipe and they get an example. We do a session where we actually make a drum of the poo brew, so we show everybody how to do it.
Yeah, and it's easy, right? Like there's not a
Yeah,
huge list of ingredients and things that a lot of farmers probably already have around their farm anyway.
cheap as chips. So
Yeah.
we can do it ourselves and get it out on the land and just help stimulate that biological process, and it works a treat.
Yeah, exciting. Well, that is podcast number 2 for Grassroots and Gumboots, Mike. Thanks again. We're getting into the hang of it.
Thank you for dragging us back on track there. I mean, we get to talking about different things, and
All righty, Mike. Thanks again. We'll talk again next week.
thanks everybody for listening, and make sure you subscribe. See ya.
So that's it for this week.
If it made you think, made you laugh, or made you want to argue with us, good.
Subscribe, send us your questions for Agony Uncle.
And get in the conversation.
I'm Kylie Woodham.
And I'm Mike McCosker.
This has been Grassroots and
the
Gumboots.
Feet on the ground. See you next week.
And this
This
is
is Grassroots
Grassroots and Gumbutts.
Gumboots.